The following IWLA webinar, Sustainability, was recorded on May 30th, 2013. All information is accurate as of that date. Good morning and welcome to IWLA's A Lean Approach to Sustainability webinar, scheduled to run between 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. Central. My name is Joe DeGuzman and I'm the Senior Coordinator of Member Marketing for IWLA. Today is my pleasure to introduce our featured speaker, Mr. Ashton Shaw. Mr. Shaw is a Senior Lean Coordinator and Sustainability Engineer for Menlo Worldwide Logistics. In his role, Ashton is responsible for the development and global deployment of Menlo's supply chain sustainability platform. He also supports Menlo's internal and external customer base and strives to integrate sustainability into Menlo's lean operating culture. Before we begin, I'd like to quickly address protocol for this webinar. During the duration of the webinar, all your lines will be in lecture mode and muted. To collapse the interface window on the right-hand side, click on the orange right arrow. Do not minimize the application, otherwise you won't be able to see the presentation. We will be taking Q&A during the presentation, so if you have any questions, use the questions box in that user interface window. When it is a good time to ask that question, I'll go ahead and interrupt Ashton and his presentation and ask that question for you. If you have any technical issues, please use that same questions function and I can respond to you directly. Parts of this presentation will be distributed via email in the next few days. With that, I'd like to hand over the presentation to Ashton. Ashton, go ahead.
All right, thanks, Joe. And thanks to IWLA for webinar. A little background about myself. I've been with Menlo Worldwide since 2008. Worked as a solutions engineer for a few years with the Navistar group. And after that, we started getting a lot of requests from our customer base asking about sustainability and specifically carbon footprint of our warehouse and transportation operations that we managed on our customers' behalf. I guess the amount of requests got to a point, critical mass, if you will, where they decided to bring on someone to help lead the efforts, respond to the requests, and support those needs. So I was brought into that role about 2 years ago now. So since then, we've been working to integrate sustainability into Menlo's operating culture, and it's just like Lean. For those of you familiar with the concepts, it's a journey. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is how we're trying to and continuing to leverage our lean operating culture and our lean processes and tools and the existing concepts that are already in place and people are already familiar with to also try and identify, uncover, and reduce environmental waste. So the objective today is to discuss how these concepts can be used to reduce environmental waste. And a little talk about, I guess, where the conversation will be focused. So within our organization, we have what we call our lean house, if you will. At the bottom, we've got our core values. And then at the foundation, ensuring that the decisions we make and what's always in the forefront of our mind is our customer, the voice of the customer, and what they're asking for, as well as respect for people, spirit of continuous improvement, and ensuring we're always going to the floor. Again, she's in root to GoLook, GoSee, go to where the work is being performed. A lot of what we'll talk about today is in this capability or stability layer. So I want to talk a little bit about 5S and workplace organization, visual management, value stream mapping, Kaizen, and talk about how these tools and these foundational elements of Lean can be leveraged. Again, to identify opportunities for sustainability improvements. So like Joe said, I encourage questions as we go through. Set the expectation. I've got about 50 slides here, so it's going to be pretty close to about a minute a slide, so we'll be burning pretty quick. Some of the concepts are maybe more familiar than others, so please, if something is, if you have a question or I'd like to hear some additional examples, by all means, the questions are welcome. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about market conditions, why approaching sustainability, leveraging lean tool sets, why there's a need for it. Then we're going to go into some of the specifics around the how. So how to use 5S type checklist. What is 5S? We're going to talk about GoLook, GoSee, visual management, value stream mapping, Kaizen, or a formal continuous improvement process, and take some additional questions. Okay, so why change? Even when we recognize change is needed, we usually don't do anything until it comes to a critical mass. There's so much change in society nowadays with technology that we're becoming pretty numb to it. But we have to also recognize the changes in market demand, the changes in expectations. Look at the external market, listen to our customer, and understand what they're looking for from their supply chain partners. At least on our side, we saw a continuing need and demand for sustainability, I guess business intelligence, if you will, being able to say to our customer, hey, we manage this warehouse, we manage these lanes of transportation for you, and here's what the associated environmental impact is. In turn, they're taking that information and putting it into their environmental report, et cetera. So we need to recognize change. The cost and operating costs are continuing to rise over time. So we also need to have some way to formally address and formally provide year-over-year savings for our customers. At the same time, market prices are continuing to go down. Our customers are expecting to pay less, get the same, if not better, performance for that price. Competition is continuing to go up. So these are all reasons that we need to find more standardized, efficient, repeatable ways to identify waste in our processes, to identify waste in our warehouse, and at the same time be able to meet and help support the strategic goals of our customers. In addition, laws and regulations around corporate social responsibility, whether it's something the organization adheres to or not, they're continuing to become more prevalent. We noticed in California with the legislation around AB 32, they're rolling out the first U.S. cap-and-trade system that's actually law. Europe, Australia, these are pretty well known. Canada have established cap-and-trade programs. Not really sure what it looks like for the U.S., but the position we've at least taken is let's get a program in place. Let's start to understand what our footprint is, so that when the time comes, we're prepared. Energy volatility is that's pretty prevalent. The cost of fuels, the costs of electricity. Fortunately, we've got fairly large reserves of natural gas that are helping to drive the price of that fuel down. Expectations are continuing to go up, especially with recent supply chain blunders. We look at the collapse of the horrific collapse of the textile mill in Bangladesh. Some issues with upstream suppliers, especially in China, and some of the labor practices. As these things become more public and the customer becomes more informed, they're going to continue to ask questions about supply chain transparency. So I think it's advantageous for us as nodes or flows or links in our customer supply chain to be able to support those requests.
Ashton, did we lose you? Nope, I see you moving your mouse around.
Joe, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. We might have lost you for a second.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Yeah, not sure where I cut out, but I just want to stress the point that with the increase in competition, lean and sustainability are two great ways to help differentiate a fairly commoditized industry. So hopefully, as we go through the presentation and we talk about some of these lean tools and how they can be integrated with sustainability, hopefully you'll be able to see some new opportunities. When we talk about the process for change, step one, just like any 12-step process, right, is acknowledging the opportunity or acknowledging the problem. from there, establishing a vision. So what is the 5-year plan? What is the 10-year plan? What is the 2-year plan of your organization? What are the principles that are, that are guiding that true north vision? Try to create partnerships with employees and customers to help explain that vision and get their support behind it. Creating commitment.
Ashton, I think your phone cut out again. You left off at the commitment it takes. Think we're still waiting for
Hello?
him. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. We lost you at, you were talking about the commitment it takes for.
Yeah, hopefully this doesn't continue. I took my headset out if that was creating interference. Yeah, so for a commitment, I know within Menlo we've established a global team of individuals who are tasked with helping to develop the lean standards and roll those out to our global operations. So it does take an investment, but for us, we've seen millions and millions in savings from the Kaizen events that have been conducted, and we'll talk about Kaizen events if that's not a familiar term, as a result of making that investment. Leadership involvement, so making sure we're going to the floor where the work is being done to identify opportunities, creating a sense of urgency amongst employees and driving for results. What gets measured gets managed. So making sure that we've got the right things being measured from an operational perspective, from a value perspective, also from an environmental performance perspective. All right, so when we talk about the relationship between sustainability and lean, we've got all forms of waste do have a negative environmental impact. And things like wasted energy, it's hard, it's not, because it's behind the scenes, because it's invisible, it's hard to track because it's something that's being consumed and most of the time is invisible. That's usually where the biggest opportunities for cost savings are coming from too, at least in the environment. When we're just looking at sustainability opportunities, environmental opportunities, the misuse or overconsumption of energy is always a huge opportunity, and we'll get more into that. So as we go through here, I want to talk a little bit about 5S and workplace organization, what that basic concept is, and then how we're trying to integrate our sustainability elements into that tool set. So 5S is the foundational discipline of lean, which leads to standard work to ensure that processes are repeatable, consistent, and that we have a foundation or a baseline to improve on. So without having some standards in place, some standardization, standardized work, there's no baseline to improve against. So what do the 5S's stand for? So it's sort, set in order, shine, standardize, and sustain. So really it's, you can treat it as formally or informally as you like. Within Menlo, we treat it pretty formally, and just kind of skip down to a photo I have here. So as a standard throughout our warehouses, we've got specific zones that are established throughout the operation, throughout every operation. Within those zones, we have the 5S assessment board or assignment board, where we have daily tasks, daily, weekly tasks that are to be done by zone, and then that's checked off by the manager. What we've been able to do, though, that's at least showcasing how we can integrate these tools, is within the checklist itself, we've integrated elements to ensure that all air compressors are turned off. If there's any air compression lines that are running through the warehouse, if those are turned off, ensuring that unused electronics or lights, if there's no motion sensors, are turned off. simple daily activities to make sure that we're not wasting things like energy, or with that, we're properly, let's say, recycling of corrugate or plastic or office paper or plastic or metal, where we're getting a significant rebate on those materials. Putting in the right place, I guess the right checks and balances to make sure that we're taking advantage of reducing those wastes. So that's one way we've been able to integrate 5S and sustainability into our practices. I thought this was kind of a neat example of 5S, if it's an unfamiliar concept or term. So you look at a fire truck, and they're always clean and organized and put together in a very specific manner. So they're sorting, so they only have necessary items. There's nothing that's unneeded inside a fire truck. They're arranged to minimize waste, proper alignment of required tools and equipment. They're clean and well maintained. There's spot inspections. They have a standard practice, so all fire trucks have the same layout. And there's high priority and support structure. So there's inspections on a daily, weekly, et cetera basis. So 5S for sustainability. When we talk about the sorting step, are hazardous and non-hazardous materials distinguished in the work area? I don't know what types of materials most of you all deal with. I know within our operations we do have some operations that where we manage and have to move around hazardous material for customers. And we need to make sure that that's visible. Make sure that it's that we're avoiding unsafe work conditions, and making things are properly sealed. And if there are those types of materials, for example, making sure that we've got the covers on and they're sealed when they're not in loose, making sure there's no leaks or spills occurring. And then we talked a little bit about SOPs. So there's within SOPs, standard operating procedures or standard work instructions. That's another place that we're working to integrate some of these elements of sustainability directly into the work practice. So, for example, if we're doing a repack operation and we receive in, a pallet of, product X, and we have to repack it into some other smaller container for the customer based on their requirements, and we're left over with a lot of product waste or a lot of corrugate or shrink wrap or whatever the waste is. We're actually working into our standard operating procedures that once that waste is generated, that this is the appropriate disposal process, the proper waste stream for the waste that's being generated in that process. And it's documented and it's standardized, and when new employees come in, they're trained on that process and held accountable and signed off on that, yes, this is the right way to manage through that. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. From a GoLook GoSee perspective, Genshi Genbutsu. So the idea again is go to where the work is being performed. Go out on the floor. So reading through kind of the purpose of this section. So the keystone to a successful lean implementation is that you can change your culture, and that can't occur without a firm understanding of the operating environment. So in the Plan, Do, Check, Act, or the Deming cycle, the GoLook GoSee is the checking mechanism. So to understand your operating environment and the culture within it, you need to go to the shop floor where the work is being done. So within Menlo, we've got a standard GoLook GoSee document that we leverage. So it touches on points of environment, touches on points of safety, touches on points of operational, touches on points of 5S. So again, it's a way that we're trying to create repeatable standard processes so that we can create an environment and a culture of sustainability and lean. So if you're not familiar with the term Gemba or going to the Gemba, going to the floor, It's a Japanese term meaning the place where the truth can be found. So it's where value-added activities take place and where the most valuable input can be found. So these types of fact-based decision-making when we're trying to improve processes, it can't, obviously, it can't be done behind a desk. Well, it can be done, but you got to go to the floor. You got to talk, got to talk to the workers, get their expertise. See if they have ideas for ways to reduce, physical or energy wastes, and also improve the efficiency of the process. Okay, so continuing on with that, seeing, feeling, and experiencing what is actually occurring. So don't rely on secondhand reports, especially if you're in a supervisor or manager position. Grasp the situation firsthand, and make it part of the vocabulary, make it part of the daily business. Daily walks on the floor definitely helps to build the build the morale with everyone as well. So we got some animation in here. So who should be participating in the GoLook GoSee? Everyone. So from management to operators on the floor, it should be a rotational type type of event where everybody is evaluating different aspects of the business. Looking at and validating and checking on 5S activities in different zones and on safety activities and environmental activities. It's that process of engagement. If you have your customers, if you're fortunate enough to have the relationship with your customers where you can bring them in, take them on a walk, let them see the operation firsthand. So definitely an experience to be had by everybody, a good learning opportunity, and a good way to get people engaged when you're trying to roll out, let's say, a more formalized continuous improvement type program. All right, so what is GoLook GoSee? So it's a shop floor exercise. It's a feedback tool, communication and teaching tool, and a tool to assist you in engaging how changes you've made have actually taken hold. So what is it? What is it not? It's not a blame game or a fault, a fault identifier. It's not a tool for criticizing, and it's not a tool for disciplinary action. So the respect for people, trying to create a fear-free environment, identify the problems and put corrective actions in place, but don't create the tool or make the tool a disciplinary thing. Then people will stop liking it or stop seeing the value of it, or they'll start hiding things, which is even worse. So when should a GoLook GoSee be conducted? I mean, this is some standards that we have within our company. So you have to do at least one per quarter, recommended one per month per shift, and yeah, I mean, obviously the best practice is to do it once per shift. All right, so where could it be conducted? Anywhere is the short answer. So looking in material closets or office equipment or wherever the packaging product is maintained, basically anywhere throughout the operation should be done. Okay, so the why behind it, it's an essential practice to get people on the floor and out from behind a computer, if that's the case at your operation, when you're trying to identify some of these improvement opportunities. Learning by experience, and again, creating that culture of improvement. Okay, so some best practices that we've seen. It's creating an annual calendar. So post them on a communication board and try and get active participation from some senior leadership. Again, everybody's got a different sized organization, and the owner of the company may also be the one located at the warehouse. But try and get them involved in those types of GoLook GoSee activities, and communicate what you find. So if if there's something poor going on in Zone A, and there's something really good going on in Zone B, don't point fingers, don't make it a blame game, but do talk about it, do communicate it, make it transparent. Part of respect for people is making sure that everybody has access to the same information and knows why decisions are being made. So if you don't, if you don't have a way to communicate that, maybe putting up some sort of communication wall, communication board, discussing it during stand-up meetings, things of that nature. All right, so switching gears a little bit and talking about visual management. So I mean, we're surrounded with visual management every day, and there's some, from the price of gasoline, when we're driving down the road, to stoplights, to construction signs, and where the airport is, and what the different restaurants and lodging options are off a given exit ramp. There's all these visual cues that we're surrounded by that tell us everything we need to know quickly and concisely. Decisions can quickly be made based on the information that's being shared. And the idea is, how can we take that, these same kind of simple visual cues and bring them into the warehouse environment? And again, for the topic of sustainability, how can we leverage these simple lean tools, these simple visual management tools, also to improve our environmental performance, identify where things may be out of place, and make decisions easy for people to make. So they don't have to think about it. They can just see it and clearly understand what the right option is. So the purpose of visual management is to understand at a glance, without discussion, what processes are people doing, what should they be doing, and how are they doing them. Also to make operations simpler to understand and easier to perform, promote standardization and consistency, and to establish a firm 5S foundation. So again, when you make things visual, when you make problems visual, it makes 5S and that ongoing evaluation and checking, going to the shop floor, Genshi and Butsu, it makes problems easier to identify, which really is the goal. We're trying to provide a high quality service to our customers, so making problems visual, is a good way to continue that work. So visual workplace intent. So setting up operations with the appropriate signage, using a standardized labeling and marking, color-coded situation. Openly communicate key expectations and share the results, and so that everybody can quickly and easily get an understanding of what's going on, what's in place, and what needs to be done next. So if there's a situation where you've got a worker coming up to you, every half hour asking what work needs to be done next, that means that process, or I guess the activity within that operation is dependent on you, dependent on you assigning out some specific work. When a more efficient way to approach workload planning would be to have on a communication board or a status at a glance board exactly what the work is based on the staffing in the operation. What's the work that needs to be done that day? We know picking is going to take X number of minutes, and put away is going to take Y, and we've got this volume to get out the door today. So here's total work. Plan versus actual. Here's where we should be at 10 o'clock. Here's where we should be at 11 o'clock. Are we falling behind? Or are we ahead? Are we winning or losing? That's the purpose of visual management. So is the information, when you're putting these types of systems in place, you always got to ask yourself, is the information important? Is it really important what you're putting up there? Is it easy to understand? Does it speak for itself, or does it require explanation? Is it easily accessible and big enough? Does your visual drive improvement by showing normal versus abnormal? So does it clearly depict when problems arise? If you're falling behind, on your work for the day. Are response guidelines clear and practiced? And does your visual promote simplicity and facilitate ease of operations? So a good number of questions to ask yourself when you're going through it. So to look at the different categories, at the foundation we've got workplace organization, 5S. It really is all dependent on having a well-maintained, organized work environment. Again, so that you have a standard to identify abnormality. That really is a big foundational element. Moving up the triangle, though, visual displays such as process maps, Shikumi diagrams, packaging specifications, things like that. Visual controls, so that would be anything that would guide behavior, such as standard operating procedures, standard work instructions. And then visual metrics, so information that helps drive improvement. So that could be number of safety incidents over a period of time, or any number of different metrics. A couple other examples, on a really solid visual management is looking at the score at a baseball game. You can get all the information from what's going on in that game, as well as probably other games that are being played that same day across the country, just by looking at the screen. So a really good way to depict information. Here's an example of a standard work instruction board. So in this case, we have a few work instructions that are posted for operators just to refer back to. And then we always like to talk about a self-guided tour. So if anyone walked into your building, would they understand what was going on? If you're winning or losing, or is there any need for explanation? All right, so moving down into value stream mapping. Hopefully this is something you're familiar with. If not, it might be a little technical, but that's nothing too bad. So it's a technique used to visually depict product and information flow from a systems perspective, and it serves as a starting point to help everyone, all stakeholders involved, associates, customers, order planners, supervisors, etc., recognize waste and identify opportunities for Kaizen, for continuous improvements. VSM, or value stream mapping, also serves as a vision or a visual tool for a more efficient, waste-free future state of the value stream. So the process, in a nutshell, is that we're trying to, within our four walls, and value stream maps, they go from super macro, total end-to-end supply chain, to macro, which would be maybe the warehousing environment, to micro, a specific process and process flow. So we'll just talk about the macro state, looking at the process, the information and product flow within the four walls of a warehouse. So the process includes mapping the current state, and then focusing on where you want to be, or developing the future state, which serves as the foundation for a continuous improvement roadmap, which hopefully is concentrated on using lean improvement strategies. So the macro cycle, if you will, or the plan, do, check, doc cycle. Let's see if I can get my mouse out here. So step one, again, is putting together what is the product and information flow for the current state. From there, identifying Kaizen opportunities or continuous improvement opportunities. So for example, when you get everybody in the room and you put together the value stream map, you may identify that product is moving 1,000 feet between process steps 1 and 2, or the unload and put away process. Huge distance. So that could be an if we could do So continuous improvement roadmap is typically something that's going to include all of your Kaizen bursts and just prioritize them based on the ease of implementation and the value that you think is there. What are the most important, what are the most pertinent opportunities that you want to pursue? And we find that putting it in a standard format, it's a common terminology, it just allows us to take it bite by bite, small steps, continuous improvement, as opposed to long, really long projects that take a while, and we're just looking for small, quick wins, a lot of small, quick wins. So the Kaizen process we'll talk about next, but that should be used to engage employees. Should be used as an educational, process. And let them know that they have some autonomy over the process itself and the improvement of that process. They're the experts. They're the one doing it, throughout the days. All right. So why value stream mapping? Again, it helps to visualize more than just the single process that's being performed, such as picking, packing, shipping, etc. It helps identify waste and determine its drivers. Provides a common language for discussing process and identifying improvement. Also makes it visual, clearly illustrates flow characteristics, linking together the combined effects of information and product flow on the value stream. Also provides opportunity to juxtapose, that's a heck of a word, to juxtapose lean concepts and techniques, helping to avoid cherry picking. And I guess with some comment on that goes back to the prioritization. So once we identify the opportunities, it's more how do we prioritize based on difficulty, ease of implementation, and value. And then it provides a basis for continuous improvement planning. All right, so if you're new to or newer to value stream mapping, this really is a very useful tool, a critical component to how Menlo operates. Be happy to talk more about it. If anybody has any questions, this 6 or 7 slides really doesn't do the concept of the tool justice. But we'll go over some of the basics here. So to start the effort, I guess step 1 is taking the vantage point. Actually, let me go down one. Here we go. So charting the map. So value streams are laid out in a standard format consisting of north, south, east, and western hemispheres. So at the top, the northern hemisphere is where we want to depict information flow coming from the customer, to the supplier, and then ultimately interacting with whatever systems you may have in place. On the southern hemisphere is where we would depict the actual product flow. So from receiving to verification, unload and verification and put away, through picking, packing, shipping, etc. So just talked about that. So product or material flows leading up to and relating to from the customer are drawn in the eastern hemisphere. So we always start with the customer. So what information is the customer sending to the supplier? So is it an 830 release, or is it a some sort of ASN? Maybe it's sequenced product. Who knows? So how is that information being sent to the supplier? Also, how is the product being shipped finally to the supplier, or I'm sorry, to the customer? On the Western Hemisphere, we want to look at product or material flows related to receiving, as well as information flows traveling to suppliers. So to kind of break it all down or give you a visual cue of what a completed value stream map would look like. And unfortunately, this is an eye chart, but I think you get the idea. So in this example, we have a customer sending orders through some standard some ERP system being sent over to the supplier. From there, the supplier is obviously shipping. It looks like daily shipments to the warehouse. From there, standard product flow steps, or unload, verify. It looks like my screen is paused. Hopefully you can still see my screen. So it goes through the basic process steps. One thing really to note here, and how this type of tool can enable the identification of environmental waste as well, is data box that's underneath each one of the process steps, as well as each one of the physical locations, is going to include things like, let's say for the supplier to the warehouse, transit times, volume, frequency of deliveries. In addition, we can identify and quantify based on that distance what's the environment, what's the CO2 footprint. During a specific unload step or put away step or repacking step in the process, we can identify how much waste is being generated. If you guys are performing any value-added services, the amount of resources that are consumed in each process step can also be depicted. So again, it's taking the value stream mapping tool and process a step further to help identify not only what are the lead times and what's the value-added time and non-value-added time in a process. Absolutely, we always want to quantify that. But in addition, what's the waste that's being generated? What's the physical waste that's being generated? There's money associated with that, whether it's receiving a rebate, someone's paying for that material, or whether it's you guys disposing of it. So what's the physical waste? What's the energy consumption or other resource consumption associated with a given process step? So that's really the opportunity to use these types of tools. On this next slide, it's a more simplistic example. In this case, it looks to be a manufacturing process. And I just wanted to illustrate, though, throughout the extrusion, molding, assembly, filling, and sterilization, in the same way that typically in a value stream map we would identify the value-added work in a given process with the non-value-added work. In this case, we're identifying the value-added resource consumption with the non-value-added resource consumption. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Oh, here we go. Here's a little snapshot of what some of the data elements would look like. Okay, moving on. So talking a little bit about Kaizen. So what is Kaizen? It's the physical application of the continuous improvement principle, the plan, do, check, act cycle. So it's a concentrated effort, many small, low-cost improvements made on an ongoing basis. Again, it's not a one-year, it's not doing a 12-month project every year. It's more doing taking 2 or 3 days, committing for 2 or 3 days the resources necessary to do a full-out small process improvement or equipment improvement or whatever it may be. And it's a problem-solving method. So it's standard steps that a team can follow to identify root causes and eliminate root causes from worksite operational processes. Here's a quick illustration of the difference between a big bold stroke type of opportunity or improvement and a small continuous improvement stair-step approach. So you'll notice here, the more small steps that we can conduct over time and get implemented over time, we're really saving ourselves the trouble and realizing more value and more benefit if we were to, as opposed if we were to perform these big bold stroke improvements. So PDCA, or Plan, Do, Check, Act, is definitely the heart the heart of the Kaizen. So I've got here step 1 through, looks like 1 through 7. This is a pretty consistent step process, and we've got some standard forms that we use too to support this. But the first step is defining the theme. So what's the theme of the project? Who's the team? What's the meeting schedule that everyone's going to adhere to fix the identified issue or capitalize on the identified opportunity? Next step is grasp the situation, which should be where 70–80% of the time is really spent, is understanding current state. So understanding the current state value stream map, understanding the current process flows, and the data that supports it, volumes, frequencies, the times to perform certain tasks, if it's a process-specific Kaizen. The identification of waste. So where, what's the distance that's being traveled, and how frequently. So all these data elements that enable fact-based decision making should be the focus. Of the second step, to grasp the situation. From there, working to develop a plan. So really, this should be, what are the SMART targets? How are you going to, what's a specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound target that you can set to measure the performance? It really goes back to measure, because if you can't measure the improvement that's being made, how do you know it's actually improving anything? So being careful to really set yourself up for success, making sure you have the right data, the right baseline data, as well as the right future state data, so that you can monitor progress before and after. From there, carrying out the plan, so implementing, and it really should be the people on the floor. It should be the people performing the work day to day that should be conducting the Kaizen, that should be participating, recommending the opportunities. And once they implement it, then the checking process comes into play. Then the 5S, the weekly 5S walks and the GoLook, GoSee, walks to the floor. That's where we're checking. That's where we're monitoring to make sure that, based on our value stream map, based on the standards that we've put in place, based on the Kaizens that have been implemented, what's actually holding and what's not. If things aren't being performed, there's another Kaizen opportunity, and that's the whole cycle. Is ensuring that check is strong, so there's a continuous rotation. From there, taking action. So make adjustments, monitor, educate. Reevaluate the process, make sure it's performing its function, and then documenting conclusions, documenting lessons learned, putting in place future plans, and also making sure that if something's not holding up, putting it back onto the continuous improvement roadmap for future refinement, if you will. All right, so Kaizen benefits. It's the systematic PDCA cycle. Again, that's plan, do, check, act cycle. And it provides the quickest path to improve process and root cause problem elimination. It requires identification and implementation of checkpoints to monitor and manage the changes. It focuses organizations on customer awareness, customer satisfaction, and fact-based decision-making. It gives team members an increased sense of worth and accomplishment as their improvements are incorporated. Again, that idea of empowerment and creating that culture. And it helps organizations become more efficient as process improvements and problem solving are done at the optimum levels. Okay, so how are they identified? So how do we identify where opportunities are? There's a number of ways. Again, maybe it's an issue, maybe it's a recurring issue. Maybe there's a problem within a specific process that's reoccurring. In that case, you would want to identify a team to work through what the root cause is of that issue using some of the standard root cause tools, 5Y, fishbone, whatever the tool is, identifying that root cause and then conducting the Kaizen to resolve it. Maybe you've got feedback from the customer. Maybe you see an opportunity, or the team or the leadership team sees an opportunity along the value stream map. Maybe there's redundancies on that value stream map, or gaps, or any number of ways. So once they're identified, they should be prioritized, again, based on ease of implementation and value. So you don't want, again, the stair-steps approach, right? So if there's a really hard problem to tackle, it's got really high value, you need to weigh that against, what can you get done this week? What can you get implemented, quickly, quick turnaround, small steps, small wins, small improvements, employee empowerment. Those are, that's really what gains the momentum. So other sources include here a Kaizen suggestion form. So again, the employees are the ones who know the work best. Do they have any ideas on how to improve the process? Are you taking advantage of that? Leadership GoLook, GoSee. So when you're on the floor, does something stand out? If you have your 5S in place and you have your visual management cues in place, is there something that's not lining up? If so, could be an opportunity for a Kaizen. You could also coordinate site lean team, GoLook, GoSees, again, to just raise awareness and help them develop those eyes for waste. And corrective action request, if that's something either your customer has in place or your operation. All right, so here's an example. So a standard 9-step process, what we call an A3. A3 simply means the size of the paper, but it's a document that we use internally, and we've been able to, and it's takes a long time, but we've been able to create a culture where any project, any opportunity, anything should be communicated via an A3. If you can't put it on an A3, it's probably not worth listening to. So, and you haven't probably done the due diligence to make a recommendation either way. So going back to the plan, do, check, act cycle we were talking about before. So step 1, what's the project theme? Step 2, what are the boundaries? What's the scope? What are we talking about? Grasp the situation. Again, this is where the bulk of the activity should be done. What's the current state data? What is the what are the volumes? What are the lead times? What are the the process step times or tack times? What wastes have been observed, etc. A detailed description of the process. What type of packaging is being used? How does it correlate with the whole? From there, establishing SMART targets and putting in place an action plan, 30/30 or action log, just to hold people accountable, make sure tasks are being performed. Should always be sponsored. One thing I didn't talk about, should always be sponsored by somebody with some seniority in the organization, and that person should hold the team accountable, and also should provide support and should be part of the process as well. So once implementation occurs, what's the change that's been made? Can you take photographs of what's been done? Are there charts or graphs that shows the improvement or the value or the time savings? How are you actually showing that your SMART targets are met? So, if you're trying to reduce something from Z% from X to Y, how are you actually tracking that? How's it being monitored, and are you on par with your plan? Documenting lessons learned and making sure that those are shared and communicated. Also, as you go through the process, you're probably going to uncover other opportunities or other concerns. And just to focus the team, it's always good to have a parking lot. So that's a great idea and something we need to pursue, but for now, let's put it in the parking lot. cost savings and calculations. Maybe you're doing an environmental Kaizen looking at energy efficiency. Maybe it's related to lighting. Maybe it's related to water consumption. Maybe it's related to waste and recycling. The same process should be applied whether you're looking at sustainability opportunities or whether you're looking at process improvement or lead time reduction opportunities. It should be synonymous. So kind of going down here, another example of just a completed Kaizen. Looks like this one was to reduce inventory along the assembly line. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody.
Thank you for listening to this IWLA webinar. For more information and for more webinars, please visit IWLA.com.